Greetings, this is video 2 of the illegal crackdown on fiancé visa fraud by an arrogant, incompetent, and corrupt U.S. federal government. You should watch video 1 first. New topic. Let's take a look at the arrogance, incompetence, and corruption of the U.S. Department of Homeland Security and Department of State. So we're talking about arrogance here first. So we have samples here of 3 letters. I don't know where these are from. I think one of them might be the Philippines. And this is basically, when you go into an interview, there's a lot written about this on visa forums. What color sheet of paper did you get when you were done? Because one sheet of paper might mean you're approved, and pick up your visa on whatever date, and you put the date down, and another one says you got a preliminary approval, but you're missing a couple things, so give us that stuff. You're going to be in administrative processing first. So these are the forms that they should be using. And then this is the kind of stuff that happens if they feel like denying your visa. So this is a letter from US Consulate in China, and this is something that you can Google, verbatim, because this is just basically a form letter. Dear K visa applicant, after the interview and a thorough review of your visa application, the consular officer found that you are not eligible for the visa category in which you are applying. So they don't even have a form letter for fiancé visas. They just say, you were found ineligible. The Consulate General, they're going to return it to the USCIS. And at the point that they deny it, the Consulate General no longer has jurisdiction on this case. If your petitioner contacts the consulate, no information will be provided, no documents will be accepted. In other words, we are demigods, and you are nobody. And you don't need to know the reason that you are denied, because you're nobody and we're demigods. So we're just going to deny you and tell you to, take a flying leap. So, like I said, you can Google these phrases and find hundreds and hundreds of examples. We just found one and threw it in there. So the Consulate General no longer has jurisdiction. Don't bother contacting us. Don't send us anything. You're done. Oh, and we're not telling you why you were denied. So this is really a severe attitude problem. And the Department of State can use the fact that the interview process is a matter of national security. They don't want to publish anything about it, but that's bull crap. They have a really, really bad attitude problem. So here I'm bringing up the IRS, and this was the IRS had a similar attitude. People were afraid of the IRS. They would say things like, you have an appointment tomorrow, bring in all the boxes and receipts you have for the last 7 years, and don't give us any crap, and be here on time, or we'll send you to prison. So the Internal Revenue Service Restructuring and Reform Act of 1998 was passed to give the IRS a new attitude, and that's what we think the Department of State needs. So the purpose of this act was to make sure that the IRS treat taxpayers properly, and treat them with respect. So this is a little bit of information on. They actually, when they passed this IRS Reform Act, they actually stuck people on the IRS board. So there's I think there's 6 members of this board. I'm not sure, but half of them, 3 of them, are outside consultants who are not members of the IRS, and they're on the board. So they basically have a lot to do with what goes on in the IRS these days. So that's what I think. It's time for a similar adjustment. You don't send people a denial letter and not bother telling them why they're denied. So incompetence. Again, these 4 different scenarios that you can have for any fiancé visa case. So this is a matter of incompetence when you have criminals who get through the system, but that's just because of pure incompetence. So here's a San Bernardino attack, and this is what a screen print looked like the day it happened. and you just heard active shooter reported, San Bernardino, and a bunch of people dead. Nobody knew anything who did this, why. Was it some crazy American going nuts at his ex-wife's family reunion or what? Nobody knew what was going on. And then they found out it was terrorists. And these are the 14 Americans who are no longer with us. Put their pictures up here for respect. And, government incompetence caused their death. And also 22 people were seriously injured. So you have people that are, could be missing limbs or in wheelchairs, because of this attack. And, it's just due to pure incompetence. How can you let terrorists into the country? It's because your policies and procedures make it impossible to catch them. Pure incompetence. Here's a screen here about the marriage shams. This is what Senator Feinstein was talking about because this happened, and she's a California girl, and the San Bernardino attack was in California, and so was this sham marriage thing here. So this was a Chinese father and daughter team, and they were posing as immigration lawyers. They weren't lawyers. They were posing as an immigration law firm. There was no legal law firm. They just opened up. You can see this, I don't know what this is, 60 South something or 80 South something, but this is downtown LA, and when you have a 2-digit address, it must be pretty much downtown. So this is a building where there were a lot of law firms, and they rented space in here, and they set up a shop, and what they were doing was getting Chinese citizens who wanted to become American citizens, and they would pay, $30, $40, $50, $80,000, to the lawyer. And a lawyer, naturally, they're going to say, okay, you want to come to the United States, we'll hook you up with someone. And then all they have to do is find an American citizen who was looking for a spouse, and they hook them up. And when they hook them up, do they look for people that are like drastically different in age or education or religion or anything else? No. They look for two people that are as similar as they can possibly get them. And they have them pose for these fake honeymoon pictures and everything. And they slide right through the system with absolutely no indicators, which means they're going to go into the interview with no indicators, which means the CO has absolutely no reason to suspect them, and they just pass and with flying colors. And like I said here, this is not an isolated case. This happens all the time. It's just, and when it happens, that means ICE found them afterwards. And then when it happens, they investigate the law firm then, and then they find out how many other cases there were, and then they find out there were hundreds. And this happens, all the time. In any given year, there's hundreds and thousands of people probably that come into this country that pay for citizenship, and the vast majority of them get through the system with no issues at all. So this is something we're trying to do through the Freedom of Information Act, is get the I-129F forms for all 70 of these people so we can take a look at them. But we already know what they look like. We know that they had very, very few indicators. Nothing that would indicate to the consulate officer that there's anything about this couple that's fraudulent. And that's the idea. That's why criminals, terrorists and criminals, can beat the system, because a 12-year-old could beat the system. So you have to wonder here, why doesn't somebody do a better job of investigating immigration law firms? They're the root problem of, the root cause of a lot of issues. Here we're going to take a look at statistics. So I had, it's been a while since my first graduate degree, my MBA, and I didn't remember statistics right. So I had a university professor school me just a little bit. I had the right idea, but the way I stated it was wrong. So we wrote to a bunch of university professors, and in statistics and in psychology, to get some feedback from them. You'll see later. So what is this? This is an age difference. So I'm giving this as an example, age difference, because it just makes a good number to play with. So in the upper left graphic here, you can see if you put the age indicator at 3 years, then your indicators would mark the vast majority of the population. So you think, nah, can't put it at 8. This is what they think like when they're, when they're making the database that the I-29F is entered into. Then if we put the indicator at everything over 10 years, we're still marking more, too much of the population. So if they play around with these indicators and say, and we don't know the exact numbers here, but let's say they put it at 15 years, now they're marking just a small portion of the population. So the whole idea with this indicator system is to flag the couples who are at the extremes. Couples that are different, have a difference in age of 15 years or whatever that number is. So now you're marking a small part of the population at the extremes of a normal curve in statistics. So the problem here is that while you're marking the extremes, the criminals know the age difference is an indicator, and I can guarantee you that the 70 couples in the sham marriage didn't have any age difference of more than 3 or 4 years, and the terrorists were less than 1 year. So, the criminals know the age indicator is one of the red flags. They know how to avoid it. The same with all the other indicators. Naturally there's no indicator for height and weight. I just use a numeric one like age because it makes a good example. But if you look at the I-129F form, there's gobs of indicators on the form. There's 6 pages on the form. And what they're doing is they're using their whole of government indicator system to mark part of the population, and they're marking the population at the extremes of a normal curve in statistics. So here's where a university professor straightened me out on my thinking. But the same idea. Human trafficking victims, other visa fraud, all the target populations avoid the indicator system, but the government still uses it because they have to do something. So who does the whole of government indicator system mark if they're not marking the target groups? Well, your fiance, if you're a US Citizen Petitioner. And this is just pure incompetence. And we're gonna see how fast I can get through this next. So there's 3 sections here: incompetence, arrogance we saw first, incompetence. Oh, so there's only one more section: corruption. So back to those 4 scenarios again. And number 3 and number 4 are both atrocities against U.S. citizens, because we're either exposing, the United States to a major security risk by approving criminals, or we're denying the rights of U.S. citizens by denying cases where you have a legitimate couple in a loving relationship. So, number 4 we just say is just pure corruption. Because why? Because I don't know where I say this. The government recognizes that 4 is a possibility. They don't really recognize that 4 is a possibility. They say if the consular officer finds you have not proved that you're a bona fide couple, then it's your fault. That's the way they look at it. Because why? Because they're arrogant, incompetent, and corrupt. We feel otherwise. You did prove it, probably. But the thing is, the government has a dilemma here. They can't approve every fiancé visa case, because if they did that, terrorists would be lined up to come to this country by the zillions. If the fiancé visa process was automatic and all cases were approved, we would be overwhelmed by criminals getting into this country. So they have to deny some cases. So, if you got denied because it was your turn. You came to the consulate on the wrong day or whatever happened. So they have to deny some cases, and what it works out to be, even though they say there's no denial quota, every year it's about 2%. And that 2% amounts to, 600 or 700 cases, or, 500 a few years ago. And when they deny that many people, of the 600, let's say, they deny 660 cases in the latest year in 2016. 600 of them were probably bona fide relationships, but they got denied because they have to deny somebody. So that's just pure corruption. And the reason it's corruption is because, it's not your fault. It's their policies. So I don't know, what do we have here? What about a practice of intentionally holding an I-129F? Oh yeah, so this is another thing they're good at. So this letter is another form letter. You can look it up, and this one came from, who knows, from Taiwan or something, or from Guangzhou, China. So this is a denial for 221G, which 221G means this is something's missing, So what you have here is a denial based on 221G, and it says our office will return their visa petition to the United States Citizenship and Immigration Service. If the visa petition has expired, because it's only good for about 4 months, by the time the USCIS receives it, the USCIS will not reaffirm or reopen the petition. So you can look at this quote too, and this is a letter that they would give back to a senator if a senator wrote and said, why did they get denied? They want to know. Hey, the couple, these are form letters from the senator too. So if you get a first letter just saying you were denied, you don't need to know why. We're gods and you're not, you're denied. If you get that letter and you write to your senator and say, I want to know why, the senator sends another form letter thinking, oh my God, I got to break away from social media for a little bit and my smartphone, and I have to send another form letter to the consulate because this couple wants to know why they're denied. I wish they'd quit bothering me. So they send a second letter, and here's what they get back. Another form letter that you can look up and see that this happens all the time too. We have examples of the same letter from Philippines. Just about anything that you're looking for you can find from the Philippines, because there's a lot of fiancé visas there. So the validity period on the I-797 is assigned for an intentionally short period of 4 months. If you get denied, now, once they approve it, they approve your packet and then they send it to the visa processing center, and that's usually 4 or 5 day process, and then the visa processing center sends it to the consulate, and that's usually a 4 or 5 day process too. So we're talking about 10 days where between the period that your case is approved by the USCIS and the time it gets to the consulate. So only 4 days went by. They could get it back in 4 days too. Even though some of these places are pretty slow. I looked into this stuff. The Philippines are really, really fast, despite the fact that they do more fiancé visas than any other country. China here is not a very hot spot for finding fiancés, and their caseload is pretty small. So they can actually return your case back to the USCIS in a matter of 4 or 5 days, but they don't. Because why? Because they're corrupt. So they're going to just sit on it for 4 or 5 months, not 4 or 5 days, to make sure that your validity period is over. Because why? Because they denied you and you might be pissed off, and they don't want you to be able to do anything about it. So they wait till your case expires. So this is corruption too, because this is not in the INA. This is policies and procedures from your Secretary of State. So numerous examples of this. I should put some more in here. There are more in the longer one. So, this is something that happens every time they deny a fiancé visa. It never gets back to the USCIS. So the USCIS can say, hey, this was denied, but it's still approved by us. We're sending it back. That's the policy. If they get it back before the expiration period, they're going to send it back. The consulate knows that. They don't want it back. They already pissed you off and denied you because it was, because they needed to deny somebody today, and they don't want to hear from you again. So they sit on it for 4 or 5 months. Corruption. So here's a slide that shows you on the left, this is the INA, Section 221G. This is the policy. After submitting documentation, your visa application can be processed to a conclusion to determine whether you qualify for a visa. You have 1 year from the date you were refused a visa to submit additional information. On the right, Section 221G. We're not waiting. We denied you. We're not waiting for any additional information because we're gods and you're not. We denied your visa. We're going to send it back to the USCIS, but it didn't get there for 4 or 5 months. That's arrogance, incompetence, and corruption. So here's another thing that's corrupt is, these guys came in here. This is panel 2, the people we already went over in video 1. So they raise their hands and they swear to tell the truth, the whole truth. They're not telling the whole truth because they know beyond doubt that their system, their indicator system and their interview cannot possibly detect a terrorist or a criminal. But they don't say that. They give other reasons. They never really come out and say that because it's a matter of national security. And here's what they could be doing, if they really wanted to find terrorists, instead of just bumping your information up against the FBI and CIA databases and your state police to find out if you're crime free, they could do a little bit more because there are anti-terrorist task forces in the United States. There's like 200 of them because a lot of cities have them and states have them. And then there's a lot of federal government anti-terrorist task forces too. And they have access. They spend all day looking at this deep web and the dark web. So they know how to monitor terrorist activity. So does the Pentagon. So the resources are there, but these guys don't bother doing it. What they do is just deny random cases. So this is later into the meeting at the 1 hour and 32-minute mark where Ted Cruz comes in. This is one of our issues. None of these senators saw this entire meeting. These guys just popped up, Cruz and Tillis. So he says, that the fiancé visa process is important. They don't want immigration policy to discourage marriage and family units coming together. And this is a little ditto here. You can pause and read this. This is how to find, a quote. If you heard something in that C-SPAN video and you want to look it up, this stuff underneath isn't just text. It's text that links to a time in the video. So read this. Senator Cruz also pointed out one of the San Bernardino terrorists entered the U.S. on a K-1 visa and that she lied about her Pakistani address. And they both lied about having met in person. So he said, what went wrong? What have you done to fix it? Because keep in mind, this is a follow-up meeting. So Emmerich takes this one too and says that there were no national security indicators on the I-129F. The check box that said I am a terrorist wasn't checked. So the terrorists lied, And the incident was reviewed by the USCIS. They added more information on the form and conducted more training to determine credibility. And he also said, we do not have robust infrastructure overseas to verify addresses. So in other words, if a terrorist puts down, if a terrorist is actually in Saudi Arabia now or United Emirates or somewhere in a U.S.-friendly country, they can lie. They don't have to bother putting down that they actually live in Pakistan, where, a country that, welcomes terrorists to kill Americans because that's the way they are. So, it's pretty easy to beat the system here. You just lie on the form. They don't have a robust infrastructure overseas to verify addresses. Put down whatever you want. So, like I said again and again, watch this entire hearing. It's 1 hour and 50 minutes long. Even senators should watch it. Even senators that are on the U.S. Senate Committee on Immigration, who were supposed to see the whole thing, they should watch it because they didn't see the whole thing. I've watched this at least 6 or 8 times from end to end, and that many more times when I was looking for information and screenshots. So he also asked, what's the current state of affairs and to what extent are we examining social media? So Emmerich replies here and says social media, we've looked at social media on 19,000 people, but we just looked at it. And then, let's see, Donahue answers something here. Oh, because Tillis comes in and asks for another one. So Tillis is, another guy that says immigration's been bad, wrong for 40 years. Yeah, it has been. So Donahue talks about social media, and he says it's a tough nut to crack. So, they're not using social media. So, this is, social media could actually prove, if they looked at it, it'd be easy enough to tell if somebody's in a bona fide relationship. Because if they are, they should have some social media, like them and their fiance. If you're talking about a couple that talks to each other every day, and a 12-year-old could look at it and say, yeah, they look pretty bona fide to me, but the government doesn't look at it that way. They're actually looking for social media to find terrorists, and that's kind of crazy because terrorists use the dark web and stuff like that. They don't. I was kidding before when I said find a gun-toting fiance.com is a terrorist site. I don't think they're that stupid. They know where to look, though. The terrorists know where to look to find other terrorists, and the government knows. It's just the USCIS and the Department of State and the US Consulates don't know. So this is just pure corruption. So I'm going to look at the age difference again here. And what I'm saying here is that you start out with a population of people who I have ILs and IHs and Ds in here. So Ds are people that get denied. They go in the trash can. And a lot of this is denied by the USCIS. And if you're denied by the USCIS, you can get a waiver for a lot of the denial reasons from the USCIS. Like, maybe your income isn't high enough to support a fiance and they deny you, and all you need is some kind of affidavit of support from your parents if you're, a college kid that met your fiance and, in college overseas. So there's ways to address that, even with some criminal activity. But, basically all the D's go in the trash can for now. And then what you're left with is a population here in this white area with people that have indicators that are low number of indicators and high number of indicators. If you have a low number of indicators, chances are you're going to be a happily married couple, and you're going to just fly right through the system. But if you have a low number of indicators, you're also going to be a successful terrorist or sham marriage or human trafficking victim. Because why? Because they can't capture you. They can't identify these groups. These are target groups. So, if you have a low number of indicators, you're either going to be a happily married couple or a happy terrorist or a happy criminal. If you have a high number of indicators, then, you go to the consulate and it's just a crapshoot. And that's why I have a roulette wheel here. It's just, it's just a flip of a coin. Are you going to be a happily married couple or are you going to get denied? It depends on how many denials they've had this month or this week or whatever. But the problem is that makes this corruption instead of just stupidity is that this area I have in the blue is their criteria, their I-129F indicators in their interview. Have they ever taken that and bumped it up against known populations of terrorists or known populations of sham marriages or known populations of human trafficking to see if their criteria can possibly pick out these target groups? No, they haven't. Because if they did, they would find out they don't work. And if they don't work, why are they using them? For example, age indicator. If that can't find a terrorist or a sham marriage couple or somebody in human trafficking, then how can they legally and morally use age indicator? Because, against the whole population. Because they know they can't capture people. They know that the only thing they're doing is marking bona fide couples. So that's just pure corruption. So that's the end of that topic, and we'll pause this here.